We're here, Jack Zenger. What a pleasure at ATD 2019.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you, Celina.
I really learned a lot from your presentation yesterday. So generous of you guys, sharing so many content, the research and everything. And you talk about leadership and what makes an exceptional leader.
Well, what we found out about 15 years ago when we were doing extensive research using a lot of 360-degree feedback that my partner had been collecting for decades is that great leaders are not perfect people. They have their warts and they have their flaws, but what they do possess is a handful of really powerful strengths. They're just very good at a few things. And when they use those, and use them kind of consistently in their work, they are perceived as being truly extraordinary leaders. Now, it helps if they're not really bad at anything. I mean, it doesn't help when people have great strengths and then they also have some glaring weaknesses. Those are few and far between. There have been a few exceptions, but as a rule, extraordinary leaders are people who possess a handful of profound strengths.
Weaknesses and strengths, the focus. So can you expand on focusing on weaknesses and focusing on strength, please?
You bet. So our research would say that for probably more than 2/3 of all managers, they would be far better advised to find the things that they do reasonably well and work on doing them even better. Now, there are about 29% of the population who have some behavior that detracts from how they're perceived. And so for them, it makes sense to kind of identify what that is and to take steps to correct it. And we find that when people identify that weakness and they step in and try to fix it, it's perceived by others that they make huge gains because they start from a very low base and they come up. So, it isn't a terribly simple answer. There's not one answer that applies to everyone, but the answer I just gave you about for 29%, better to kind of work on that weakness that stands out. But for the great majority of the population, it's better to kind of say, what do I do relatively well? Where my passion? What does the organization need me to do? What do I need to contribute? And that's what I should work on.
Yeah, great. You talk about magnifying the strengths, and how do we choose the strengths to magnify?
Well, I think you use kind of three filters. The one filter is, what am I capable of doing really well? What do I have the competence to do in a very effective way? Whether it's problem solving, whether it's being very technically, kind of expert, whether it's being a good collaborator, a good team player, whether it's being strategic in my thinking. So part of it is your ability to actually do that. How obtainable is that for you? Secondly, is it something about which you have some passion? Because you may want to do something really well, but if you don't have real passion about it, if you're not really excited about it, chances are you won't sustain it. It'll be a flash in the pan. You'll do it and then you'll quit doing it. And the third thing is, and we think a lot of organizations kind of miss this one, and that is, so what does the organization need? You work for a company right now, and you're in some given position. What does the organization truly need from you? What can you uniquely contribute to the success of this organization? And so I think it's the intersection of those three things: your capability, your passion, and what the organization needs from you. That's the strength you should work on.
I love that. That's very well put it. And let me ask you, do you think that we are the best judges of our own strengths?
Well, we've got a lot of data that says the answer is no. You're not the best judge of your strengths. People who are really good, often it comes quite naturally to them, and they don't realize how good they are. I mean, I think you've known people and I've known people who were extremely strategic in their thinking. But if you were to kind of ask them, are you a great strategist? They wouldn't necessarily identify themselves that way. So we have a lot of data that says that of all the groups of people who you call upon to assess a manager, the person themselves, their boss, their peers, their direct reports or their subordinates, of all those groups, the individual himself or herself is the worst judge of their strengths. All the others come much closer to the aggregate total score that is generated. And the phenomenon that's kind of ironic in a way is that the people who are most effective tend to underestimate their abilities, and the people who are the least effective tend to overestimate their abilities. And so the discrepancy kind of varies on both ends.
Yeah, so I think that we could work on that a lot inside organizations and focusing on our strengths. And what do you think that how you have tools for us to measure an assessment? Is it available to the public?
So we think that the most effective assessment is what's often been referred to as multi-source or multi-rater feedback. And what that says is that when you get many people who work with you to kind of put together their observations, their assessments of what you do really well, and those areas where you may have some flat side or kind of some weakness, when you put all that data together, that's called 360-degree feedback. It gets its name from this, it's a circle around you in terms of all different perspectives. We find that those instruments, when you put that data together, provides a far more accurate assessment of you and a more helpful assessment of you than any battery of psychological tests, than any other assessment device that we can find. So it's economical. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it comes closer than anything we've been able to find. And so here in the United States, about 85% of companies use 360-degree feedback as part of their leadership development. And my belief is that the real power of 360-degree feedback is not just the information it gives you, but it is that incentive and that motivation and that vision that, I can fix that, or I can be better at that. And so it provides the tool and the desire.
Okay, so we have this marvelous information, and from so many years of working inside companies, and it's such an honor to learn from you. And you closed your presentation yesterday with Peter Drucker. But, I want something from you. I want, Peter Drucker, and I also want you. What is the statement that you could close, and the most important message that you could send to us, people that work with people? Can you share with us that? We can have something of Peter Drucker, but I want Jack Zenger.
Well, if one of my grandchildren came to me and said, "So, what piece of advice do you have? I'm about to get appointed to be a supervisor in a company that I work in, and do you have any advice for me?" What I would be inclined to say to him or her would be, learn to ask other people for feedback. Learn to, because it has a wonderful ability to, in a strange way, build your confidence in yourself. So I'll tell you a quick story. A colleague of ours named Kevin Wilde, who had been the chief learning officer at General Mills, had come out to one of our conferences and given a presentation. He's been home for a couple of days. I get a phone call from him, and he said, Jack, I've got a question. I'd like to ask you a favor. Give me one observation about the presentation that I made that you think would make it a better presentation. And so I thought about it for a moment or two, and I said, well, there was one little thing that I thought would have helped it. Thank you, that's all I wanted. We hung up the phone after kind of exchanging some pleasantries, and I thought, now I know why you are so good. At one short conversation, you said, I honestly want to get better. I'm going to give this presentation again, and I'd like to learn and find a way to ever continuously improve it. I respect you. I'm asking you for not a compliment. I mean, he was clear he wasn't fishing for compliments. I want a suggestion for having it done better. And I believe that the very process of him doing that makes him more confident.
That's a great advice, and I'm getting that for myself. I'm going to do that. I'm really, it's so good to have this possibility, because sometimes feedback sounds a little threatening, but when you say that feedback could help us be more confident, I love that.
Yeah, I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, and some people think, well, if I ask other people, they're going to think I'm weak, or I'm not. But just the opposite. Our data is really clear. Yes, subordinates and colleagues appreciate people who give them feedback, but even more, they admire the supervisor who asks them for their feedback.
So this is the message from the one and only Jack Zenger at ATD 2019. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. You're most welcome. Nice to be with you, Celina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.